say in Ireland, you don't find the Banshee. The Banshee finds you. And when she does, she's not warning a stranger. She's warning your blood. She knows your name, your line, your fate. And no matter how far you've run from the old country, across oceans, across decades, across the carefully constructed walls of your modern life, she will find you. What you're about to hear are 3 true accounts. 3 men, 3 encounters with something that cannot be explained away. Something ancient, something wailing, something that arrived before death knocked on the door. I want you to listen carefully, because the terrifying thing about the Banshee isn't just what she sounds like, it's what she means. She is never wrong. I'm not the sort of man who talks about this kind of thing. I work in construction, I drink on Fridays, I watch football. I am about as far from superstitious as a man can be. But I've never told this story to anyone outside my family, and even then, we only speak of it in low voices. You know that feeling when something happens that breaks the rules of how the world is supposed to work? That's what this was. It was October of 2011. I was 23, living back home with my parents in a small house just outside Oranmore. My grandfather, we called him Granddad Seamus, was staying with us for a few weeks. He'd been unwell for about a year, nothing dramatic at first, tiredness, a persistent cough. But by that October, the doctors had said their piece, and we all knew, quietly, in that way families know things without saying them, that he was running out of time. I remember that night clearly because it had been a good evening. Seamus had eaten a full dinner, which was rare by then. He'd laughed, genuinely laughed at something on the television. My mom had made his favorite, shepherd's pie, and he'd had 2 helpings. We'd gone to bed feeling something close to hopeful. It was around 2:30 in the morning when I woke up. I didn't know what woke me at first. I just found myself sitting upright in bed, heart hammering, in that horrible way where your body knows something before your brain does. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels wrong. And then I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind. We get strong winds off the Atlantic out there, and they can do strange things around old stone walls. But this wasn't the wind. The wind doesn't rise and fall like a human voice. The wind doesn't carry grief in it. This sound, I struggle even now to describe it. It was like a woman weeping, but stretched beyond what weeping should be. Long, low, undulating. And there was something underneath it, almost like words, but in a language older than anything I could name. I got out of bed. I went to the window. Our back garden runs down to a low stone wall, and beyond that there's an old field that's been there longer than anyone can remember. And at the far edge of that field, near the gap in the wall where the foxes get through, there was a shape, white or pale, hunched I thought at first, but then it straightened, and it was tall, taller than it had any right to be. And the sound was coming from it, that wailing, that keening, a word I didn't even know then, was pouring out of it like smoke. I stood there frozen for what felt like minutes, and then the shape turned. Not its whole body, just its face, or where its face should have been. And even at that distance, in the dark, something inside me, something ancient and cellular, deeper than thought, told me to get away from the window. I went back to my bed. I lay there shaking until morning. My grandfather died at 6:47 the next evening, just slipped away in his chair, peaceful as you like. Mom found him. When I told my mother what I seen and heard that night, she went very still. She didn't look surprised. She looked like a woman hearing news she'd been dreading for years. She sat down, and after a long moment she said, "The women in our family have spoken of her before. She follows the Murphys. She always has. I don't sleep well anymore when the Atlantic wind picks up." People think the old things stay behind when you leave Ireland. That's the lie you tell yourself on the plane.
You convince yourself that the Atlantic is wide enough, that concrete cities are modern enough, that a new zip code can put distance between you and whatever it is your blood carries. I came to Boston when I was 26, built a life here, an American wife, 2 kids, a job in IT that I'm good at. I became, in most ways that mattered, a Boston man. I followed the Red Sox. I learned to drive on the right hand of the road. I stopped saying grand when I meant fine. But the summer my father came to visit, the last summer he ever visited, something came with him that I don't think he even knew he'd brought. This was the summer of 2019. My father, Patrick, was 68. He was a big man in that old Irish country way, broad shoulders, red-faced, hands like shovels. He'd worked the land all his life, and he was proud of it. He wasn't sick, as far as we knew. He'd passed his checkup earlier that year. He was planning to retire the following spring. He arrived in June, and we had a wonderful 3 weeks. We took the kids to Cape Cod. He met my American friends and charmed every single one of them. He called my wife Love on the 3rd day, and she was his forever after that. He was the version of my father I'd always wanted him to be, relaxed, present, happy. He was due to fly home on a Wednesday. The Monday before he left, I was awake late. My wife and kids were in bed. My father had gone to sleep around 10. I was sitting in the kitchen, laptop open, finishing some work. It was maybe midnight. Our house is a mid-century detached in a quiet suburb. The street is tree-lined. The neighbors are mostly elderly. The kind of street where nothing happens, which is exactly why we chose it. And then I heard it, outside the kitchen window. My first thought, I swear this is true, was that someone was playing audio through a phone, a woman's voice, wailing, a sustained, mournful sound that rose and fell in a cadence that sounded almost musical, but was entirely wrong, like music from a country that doesn't exist. It went on and on, not fading, not stopping, just cycling through its ancient, terrible grief. I went to the back door. I turned on the porch light. I stepped outside. The sound stopped the moment my foot touched the decking. Nothing out there. Trees, darkness, the distant sound of a car on the main road. But the air felt wrong, heavy and cold, even though it had been a warm July night. And there was a smell, something I later could only describe as old earth and rain and decay, but not unpleasant in a way that disturbed me more than if it had been. I went back inside. I locked the door. I didn't sleep. My father had a massive heart attack on the Thursday morning. He had already flown home by then. He died in the ambulance on the way to University Hospital Limerick, somewhere over the Clare border. My cousin Ian, who drove the ambulance, later told me that my father had looked peaceful, that he hadn't been in pain at the end. I am grateful for that, I am, but I haven't stopped thinking about the window, the voice, the air that smelled like old Ireland in the middle of a Massachusetts summer. She followed him across the Atlantic. She followed him to my house. She wanted me to know. I don't know if that's a mercy or a cruelty.
My name is Fionan. I'm 52 years old. I've been a secondary school teacher for 26 years. I teach history, which means I spend my days explaining the past to people who haven't lived it yet. I believe in evidence. I believe in documentation. I believe in the things that can be traced and verified. This thing cannot be traced or verified, and it changed me anyway. What I'm about to tell you happened in the winter of 2016, and what makes it different from the other stories you may have heard is this. I didn't hear the Banshee. My 7-year-old son did. His name is Oisín. He's 15 now, and he still won't talk about that night. Not to me, not to his mother, not to his therapist, who we brought him to briefly in the months after. He just shakes his head and looks away. That tells you everything about the weight of what he experienced. It was a Tuesday night in January. Cold, clear, the kind of Northern Irish winter night where the stars are savage and the frost comes early. I'd put Oisín to bed at 8:30. He was tired from school. No fuss, out quickly. My wife, Aoife, and I had an ordinary evening. Television, tea, a conversation about something entirely mundane that I can no longer remember.
At 11:15, O'Sheen appeared at the top of the stairs. This was unusual. Once that child was asleep, he was gone until morning. He was standing, very still, which was also unusual. He was in his pajamas, and his face was doing something I'd never seen it do before. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was bigger than fear. It was the expression of someone whose understanding of the world has just been fractured. He said, very quietly, "Daddy, there's a lady crying outside my window. She's been crying for a long time, and I don't know how to make her stop." I want you to understand something. O'Sheen's bedroom window faces the back garden. Our back garden backs onto a laneway, which is itself backed by the rear walls of the houses on the next street over. There is no earthly reason for any woman to be in that laneway at 11:15 on a January night. I went upstairs. I looked out his window. I heard nothing. I saw nothing. I told him it was probably a cat, or the wind, or a dream. I sat with him until he settled. He fell back to sleep eventually, but fitfully. The next morning, my mother called. Her voice told me before her words did. My Uncle Brendan, her brother, my father's oldest friend, a man who had been part of my life every day I could remember, had died in his sleep at approximately 10:30 the previous night. They'd found him in the morning, still in his chair, the television still on. 10:30. O'Sheen had come to the stairs at 11:15, 15 minutes after Brendan died. I sat in my car in the school car park that morning and didn't go in for 40 minutes. Because I am a history teacher, I believe in cause and effect. I believe in the rational ordering of events, and I had just run out of rational. Later, much later, when I finally felt able to look it up, I read about the Banshee, about how in some of the oldest accounts she is seen and heard first by children, because children haven't yet built the walls that adults use to keep old things out. How she keens not only for the dead, but for the grieving. How she sometimes chooses to announce herself not to the person who is dying, but to the person who will feel the loss the deepest. O'Sheen had loved Brendan in that whole and uncomplicated way that children love people who have all the time in the world for them. Brendan had no children of his own. He'd spent 30 years being a kind of secondary grandfather to my son. She knew. She knew who would need a warning most. I still don't know what to do with that. I'm not sure I ever will, but I know what my son heard. I know when Brendan died, and I know there are 15 minutes between those two facts that no amount of history can explain.
3 men, 3 nights, 3 times a sound moved through the dark that shouldn't exist in the world we think we live in. You can call it grief hallucination. You can call it coincidence. You can call it the power of suggestion, or the way fear reshapes memory. Or you can accept, just for a moment, that what those men accepted in the hours after their loss, that something ancient and knowing has moved through Ireland for longer than memory, and that it does not come to frighten, it comes to prepare. The Banshee does not take your loved one. She simply knows before you do that they are going, and in her own terrible, loving way, she is saying goodbye. Sleep well tonight, and if the wind outside sounds a little too much like grief, don't look out the window. Don't look out the window.